these kids the boundaries are never in place. And so where do you focus with those things in terms of the emotional intelligence while sustaining the warrior mindset or warrior ethos, if you will, in that critical prepubescence and puberty phase?
Where we need to go in the future is to create this balance between heroic intelligence and health intelligence. And heroic intelligence is wonderful up to a point, meaning that it gives us the opportunity to know how to overcome boundaries, to do things that aren't easy for us to do, like you did with it. You know, every single step of being a Navy SEAL is just like doubting yourself. Okay, no, I can do it. Then maybe failing here or at a time or two, and instead of giving up and saying, I can't do it, having the resilience to come back and try again. And to sort of, and rather than hear people constantly around you complaining, that demoralizes you, having people around you saying, no, I can do it, and focusing on that. That's, more heroic intelligence. However, it's also important to know that to become a hero, let's say you're in boot camp, and the sergeant, let's say you're Jewish, and the sergeant makes a comment like, okay, look at, so he makes some type of anti-Semitic comment, and you raise your hand and you say, excuse me, Sergeant, sir, but, I was, I'm Jewish, and I was really offended by that anti-Semitic comment. Now, the response of the sergeant will be something like, oh, isn't that little sweet? Look, we have a little Jewish boy here. Why don't you do 10 push-ups, Jewish boy, if you can do a push-up? Do you know what a push-up is, sweetie?
That pretty much sounds about right there.
Yeah, right. Maybe the little sergeant in me.
There's one in all of us. You know that.
And so why is the sergeant doing that? The sergeant is doing that because the sergeant knows that the war machine does not operate well with squeaky wheels. And when people complain that your job as being part of that war machine is being willing to die and do everything that you need to do without concern for yourself and your feelings or your fears, but to overcome your fears and to recognize that, yes, you have a good chance of dying. And if you don't have a good chance of dying, you'll come maybe back with PTSD. And that is your job. And if you make close friends, it's going to hurt all the more if a really close friend dies in your hands, or gets, shot and it is not quite killed, and you spend a lot of time rescuing him or her, and maybe you'll get killed in the process, but that's exactly what your job is. So don't focus on your fears. Don't focus on your feelings. Now, that is extremely healthy for people who are being trained to die, trained to be disposable. And that was the male role, was to be willing to be disposable. Men were really trained to be the disposable sex, either in war or in work, either as, in all the hazardous jobs. 93% of the people that are killed in hazardous jobs are males. You think of your construction workers, your long haul truck drivers, your people who are logging trees, all of your welders. Those are all male dominated jobs because the males are much more likely to be willing to risk their lives doing those jobs. And so that is useful for doing the jobs that are necessary for the survival of the nation. We are not being ruled by Nazis because we had millions of men all over the world that have died, preventing us from having to be ruled by Nazis. And so this is the positive value of that, but it's also the negative value because those men learn to repress their feelings and give no thought to themselves. And so when they came home if they did manage to survive the process and came home, men are 20 times as likely to die of suicide as they are to die in any given year in a war. And so that is really, and so that means that their emotional intelligence, their willingness to speak up and say, I really was offended by that, or I really am hurt, or my leg, I think it, is infected and it could come come off and say what we feel, that has been neglected, and the result of that is twofold. You mentioned before that we're oftentimes lonely and we don't have friends, and that loneliness creates mental health problems, and especially during COVID. And so this has been, but even outside of COVID, if we say what our fears are to a woman oftentimes will lose respect for us because we're sort of talking about, we fear that a woman will lose respect for us because we're showing vulnerability and she wanted a strong man. If we say it to other men, the men lose respect for us. So where is the incentive to open up and to get in touch with our feelings? We men are very bottom line. And we know that if we can't express our feelings in the long run, why even get in touch with them in the short run? Because it's only going to go to some place that's going to frustrate us, and we won't be able to do that. So we're not even in touch with our feelings, because we know that there's nowhere down the line that anyone wants to know who we are. So we've spent the last half a century focusing on women and women's problems women don't think that we have problems. They think that we're filled with power and we're the male patriarchy and things like that, because we haven't said anything, and women can't hear what men don't say.
That's brilliant.